Hello, it is September 5th. It's almost midnight, so it's almost September 6th. And I am making a video of my studio, a little tour to start out, because I've been working on it really hard the last couple of days, so I'm super excited to show it to you guys. Um, so sorry, just bit my tongue, stupid braces. I have been I don't know, kind of overwhelmed with all the insanity of the leadership of our country or lack thereof. All of this noise with the what I call the little E files, sort of like the X files. And look, my little puppy dog, she knocked down my Marlon Brando. Hold on. All right, so let me give you the full tour, if I may. Let's see how this goes, because it's always super tricky. I'm going to turn. I had to put a thing over that light so it wouldn't overwhelm the camera. But this is the really good part. Do you see the waterfalls, kind of backdrops? And just knocked something over. That's okay. That's okay. I got it. I got it. So I think that's about it. Did you get a good look at that part of the waterfall? Going back again. I have a lot of fun with my set. It's very much my art therapy. I find it incredibly soothing and calming to be messing around with it. It is a lot of work, but I absolutely love it. And my set up where I want my camera to be again. I think I'm almost there. One sec. It's pretty precise. Like I said, I knocked down one of my lights, but that's pretty good if I only knock down one light with all of that activity with the laptop. Let's see if I can just put it right back like that and call it good. And then start talking about this crapola. Everything I say is simply my opinion for the sake of hoping to start a conversation, open up a discussion, learn something, be educational. All my videos are made for YouTube. It's an infotainment platform. Um, oh no. Let's see. I did not do it the way I wanted it. I gotta get this closer that way, I think. See, when you just like touch something the slightest bit, everything changes. Okay, I think that's better. Kind of. This whole thing, it's craziness. It is craziness. This is why I decided to simplify my set, and then slowly I've been complicating it again with all of the cool stuff. But like I said, I love it. It really is my art therapy. That's my training. My background is mental health and art therapy. Um, and everything I say, I already did all that, didn't I? Please hit your like button if you'd be so kind. Make sure you're still subscribed. Turn on your notification bell to ring. And share a video of mine with somebody that you think might like my channel. So I'm quickly gonna just jump right into this stuff that I've got in my notes. The most important part of it is there's a lot of important parts. I mean, I've been really focused on the e-files and the victims, and they finally had their day on the steps of the Capitol. What was that? Three days ago? No, just the day before yesterday, because we're almost, well, we're still at Friday. So yeah, it was Wednesday that um, the survivors from Little E's abuse spoke publicly, and dear leader had a couple of airplanes flying over. So I wanted to say a couple of things about those airplanes. You know, it was, I think, incredibly obvious what he was doing. Like, literally, not only trying to drown out their voices, but also to threaten them, basically. It was the day after there was possibly a bomb dropped on a Venezuelan boat that was allegedly bringing drugs to our country. There's been some talk about could that have been AI? And sure, I think it could have been. And it's also entirely possible that it was real. But my point in bringing it up is that either way is crazy. If it was real, it's just bizarre that they're going to show that on TV right after. And everything about it was bizarre. How illegal it was, and you know, from the ground up is bad. It's really bad. And if it's artificial intelligence, then that's good that they didn't do all that illegal stuff. They being the military and our government. Um, but why would they lie to us? Why would they make an AI video and say, look, this is real? So either way, it's effing crazy. And I'm so sick of the insanity of it all and us having to allow that to be our new normal. We live in the United States of America. We do not live in the USSR or North Korea or China. I'll never forget when dear leader spoke of China and almost made it sound like something really obscene. Anyway, there was also a failed Navy expedition operation from 2019 that just so happened to be in North Korea that it hasn't been reported on until just now. This Navy SEAL failed operation, again from 2019, where lives were lost and the whole thing was just catastrophic. It was not what was planned, and it was not okay. And it's been suppressed for 6 years. So it was just reported on today, I believe, in the New York Times. So I've seen a few people talking about it on YouTube. David Muir talked about it on the World News Tonight. And I believe that it's the New York Times that broke the story. But yeah, it's effing crazy. So 2019, going back to that year, would have been a year before COVID, towards the end of dear leader's first presidency. Oh man. So it seems to me that little T is intentionally trying to basically drop a bomb on these little E survivors. So his actions, his words is just deplorable, absolutely deplorable. And I'm sure extremely traumatizing to these people who've already dealt with so much in their lifetimes. It's extraordinarily sad. To me, it couldn't be more obvious, in my opinion, that he is guilty AF and he's flipping out, literally blowing things up to try to make distractions. Like, one of the things that just drives me nuts with him and the people that the sycophants that surround him is when they're confronted about the little e-files, and they of course get very defensive, and they almost always throw back out there about the JFK files. It's like, we're not talking about the JFK files. You know, they tried that, right? They tried, like, oh, look, we're doing a big document dump of the JFK files. It's like, no, that's not what people are focused on right now. People are focused on the Epstein files. It's been long enough that this crap has been swept under the rug, that Acosta gave him that insane deal. Calling it a sweetheart deal to me is just not okay. It's an illegal deal. Everybody involved in that deal, in my opinion, should be charged with obstruction of justice at the very least, and go from there. So, you know, the other people that like to bring up the JFK files, those are people like Dear Leader, of course, Bondi, Cash Patel, and where in the F is Dan Bongino? Like, he's still MIA. I don't know about that guy. Like, I'm thinking that he is not okay with the corruption, and if that's the case, then good for him. Good for him that he's not okay with the corruption. But the whole thing is just so, so bizarre. Um, so yeah, the timing of blowing up that boat, the alleged Venezuelan drug mule boat with the 11 people on it, the night before the Epstein survivors had their day scheduled where they were going to be speaking on the steps of Congress. I'm losing my train of thought here. The timing of it, to me, was a direct threat to these survivors, that I could drop a bomb on you too. You know, you've got a plane flying overhead like that, you don't know. You just don't know. And when it's that fresh in everybody's mind, everybody who pays attention to the news, which I would imagine that the women that were coming to Washington, D.C. to speak, I would imagine that they might have been paying attention to the news. But how exhausting, how humiliating and frustrating to be not only treated that way by the leadership in our government, but to basically be called liars, to be accused of being what, like Democratic plants that are trying to undo the great success of the Donald. Could he be more like the Wizard of Oz? I mean, come on. Like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? And then all those effing flying monkeys, Cash, Bondi, RFK. That's a whole nother topic, that RFK crap. Let's hop over into that. He was put into that position, Secretary of Health, looking like death warmed over, sounding like death warmed over. I've done some research into the vocal cord situation, and that can happen, the spasming of vocal cords, from a variety of different causes. But I've heard other content creators say this, and it rings true to me, is that he's got crack pipe voice, it seems. He did a lot of rugs in his lifetime. He claims that he's been sober for like 40 years. and still crazy as a freaking loon, in my humble conspiracy theory opinion, allegedly. But is he sober? Because I don't know. He seems to be abusing maybe other substances, which isn't extremely common for people in recovery. It's extremely common to just sort of substitute one addiction for another and just not even admit it to yourself. You know, if you were an alcoholic, then you're maybe a shopaholic, maybe gambling, maybe sexual activity. I mean, people get addicted to a lot of things. What's important when you're in recovery, and for all of us, it's important to take care of ourselves and to be healthy and balanced. And, you know, it's called white knuckling it when you're not taking care of yourself, when you're in recovery, but you're still suffering from the problems that got you into the addiction in the first place. Ugh. And I speak from experience. I've been in recovery since 1990. I'm so bad I don't even keep track of it. It's around this time of year too. So like October. Um, yeah, that's 35 freaking years, man. I never thought I'd get here. So sobriety is the best gift we can give to ourselves. Absolutely. So I think it's important to stay in touch with your own issues when you're talking about other people's issues. Like, why are you so focused on the issues that you're focused on? It's usually because it is resonating within you for a certain reason. So RFK is a spoiled Kennedy who, I don't know, is extremely promiscuous, has put people around him through a lot. In the position that he's in as the Secretary of Health, it's almost like he's torturing this entire country and threatening this entire country. I mean, the is it two kids that have passed away in Texas from the measles? I think it's still just two. It's too many. Can you imagine that being your kid? And something like that that's so preventable. So preventable. Very sad. Um he was in some type of congressional hearing yesterday. He was in the hot seat. It seems that he may get fired. He may be forced to resign. But he also very well may not be. I mean, that's what the stuff in Congress was about yesterday. Um, and he just lies through his teeth. They asked him something about the Jeffrey Epstein survivor protesters outside, and he literally denied seeing it or hearing about it or anything. This man, RFK Jr., is all over those Epstein files. All over those Epstein files. I just don't know what else to say other than that, other than adding maybe, in my opinion. Um, I mean, I've always suspected that, but I've had it confirmed. And also, I've always been very suspicious of Pete Hegseth. Um, Remember when Trumpster Fire was trying to appoint Matt Gaetz to be in Pamela Bondi's position? And he was not only extremely promiscuous with underage girls, he would brag about it, you know, with he'd show pictures of these, I don't know if they were like 17 or, you know, not 18, not young women, still girls, still underage. And he would talk about it at work on the Senate floor. I wanted to clarify yesterday too. I was confused when I was talking about Mitch McConnell and his wife, Elaine Chao. Cho. So I was saying that Mitch McConnell was a representative, and obviously he's a senator. I knew that. I just forgot. Um, and yes, he's been like the longest running senator in the history of all senators. 40 years. 40 freaking years. His wife has not been part of Congress, but she was she was the Secretary of Transportation under was it under Biden or under Obama? Um, anyway, she's had a number of very impressive positions, and I was gonna read a little bit just so I can be actually clear on the issue for you guys. Um, let's see. Mitch McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao. I'm probably saying her last name incorrectly. It's Chao. So she served as the director of the Peace Corps from 91 to 92 and president of the United Way of America from 93 to 96. She served on several Fortune 500 and nonprofit board of directors, including the electric charger network provider ChargePoint since 2021. I do know for sure that she was the first person to resign after the insurrection. So that really pissed off the dear leader. And Mitch McConnell was really in a pickle over it. So, um, let's see. Before being appointed to government work, Chao was a vice president for syndications at Bank of America, Capital Markets Group in San Francisco, and she was an international banker at Citicorp in New York. She was granted a White House fellowship during the Reagan administration. In '86, Chao became Deputy Administrator of Maritime Administration in the U.S. Department of Transportation. From '88 to '89, she served as chairwoman of the Federal Maritime Commission. This is a power couple. If you've ever seen a power couple, this is it. In 1989, then President George W. Bush nominated Chao to be Deputy Secretary of Transportation. Oh, I'm sorry. I was wrong about that. I was thinking it was one of the Democratic presidents. It was Bush. So she served as the Secretary of Transportation and actually Deputy Secretary of Transportation from '89 to '91. 91 to 92, she was the director of Peace Corps. I already read that part. She was the first Asian American to serve in any of these positions. She expanded the Peace Corps presence in Eastern Europe and Central Asia by establishing the first Peace Corps programs in Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and the newly independent states of the former Soviet Union, including the first Peace Corps programs in Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, and Russia. Between Bush administrations, following her service in President George H.W. Bush's administration, Chao worked from 92 to 96 as president and CEO of United Way of America. She was the first Asian American to hold that role. She is credited with returning credibility and public trust to the organization after a financial mismanagement scandal involving former President William Aramani. From 96 until her appointment as Secretary of Labor, Chao worked at a conservative think tank in D.C. She was also a board member of the Independent Women's Forum. She later returned to think tanks after leaving the government in 2009. Chao delivered a speech at the 2000 Republican National Convention. She was the only cabinet member in the George W. Bush administration to serve for the entirety of his 8 years. She was also the longest serving Secretary of Labor since Frances Perkins, who served from 1933 to 1945 under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Chao was unanimously confirmed by the Senate for her appointment as Secretary of Labor. Of Chao's staff, Victoria Lipnick, Assistant Secretary for Employment Standards Administration, later became member EEOC and acting chair. In 2004, the department issued revisions of the white-collar overtime regulations under Fair Labor Standards Act. I find this fascinating. I'm sorry if it's boring for you. You can watch another video or fast forward, but I'm just going to finish it because I've read through it before, but it's really different when you read it out loud than when you're reading it to yourself. Union disclosure requirements. In 2002, a major West Coast parts dispute costing the U.S. economy nearly $1 billion daily was resolved when the Bush administration obtained a national emergency injunction against both the employers and the union under the Taft-Hartley Act for the first time since 1971. Led by Chao in 2003, for the first time in more than 40 years, the department updated the labor union financial disclosure regulations under the Landrum-Griffin Act of '59, which created more extensive disclosure requirements for union-sponsored pension plans and other trusts to prevent embezzlement or other financial mismanagement. Response to 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. Following the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, Chao's Department of Labor dispersed grants to provide temporary jobs to assist in the cleanup and restoration efforts in New York, as well as the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's monitoring of health and safety. Yeah, I thought I was like reading in a circle. Let me try that again. I think, am I in a circle and they're in a circle? Chao's Department of Labor dispersed grants to provide temporary jobs to assist in cleanup and restoration efforts in New York, as well as the Occupational Safety and Health Administration's monitor of health and safety of cleanup work being performed at the disaster sites, including Lower Manhattan. How weird to like repeat the same words like that. Sorry for the noise. I might have to edit that out. I just whacked that metal table. Let's see. Where was I? Cleanup work being performed at the disaster sites, including Lower Manhattan. The department also provided unemployment insurance and income support for those who lost their jobs in the aftermath of September 11th, which we're coming up on, huh? Following the 2005 hurricane season, which includes Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, Wilma, the Labor Department dispersed nearly $380 million in grants to assist with cleanup work and provide benefits and services to those displaced by the storms. The Occupational Health and Safety Administration and other agencies deployed personnel to the region to provide safety training and uphold workers' rights. Chao set up emergency response hotline. She set up an emergency response hotline dedicated to the Gulf Coast region for people seeking benefits and worker protection information. Government Accountability Office reports. I mean, a very impressive resume. Very impressive. After analyzing 70,000 closed case files from '05 to '07, the Government Accountability Office reported that the department's wage and hour division inadequately investigated complaints from low and minimum wage workers alleging that employers failed to pay the federal minimum wage, required overtime, and failed to issue a last paycheck. That is so sad. The Department of Labor responded that the investigation focused on individual complaints while the department remained focused on resolving complex and multi-employee complaints. From 97 to '07, the annual number of employees receiving back wages as a result of DOL action almost doubled, and the dollar amount of back wages paid more than doubled. Back wages paid more than doubled. The Washington Post echoed that Chao's department was criticized by some for walking away from its regulatory function, but also praised by others for providing compliance assistance and helping companies abide by the laws rather than punitive enforcement that stifles economic growth. In '08, Government Accountability Office, a 2008 Government Accountability Office report noted that the Department of Labor gave Congress inaccurate numbers which understated the expense of contracting out its employees' work to private firms during Chao's tenure, which may have affected 22 employees at the department. Mining regulation. Chao and Bush administration proposed quadrupling fines imposed against mining corporations for mine safety breaches and sued mine operators for failing to maintain safe working conditions. A 2007 report by the department's Office of Inspector General found that mine safety regulators did not conduct federally required inspections at more than 1 in 7 of the country's 731 underground coal mines in '06, and that the number of worker deaths in mining accidents more than doubled to 47 in that year. The Mine and Safety and Health Administration missed 147 inspections at 107 mines, employing a total of 7,500 workers. Mining disasters in '06 and '07 included West Virginia's Sago mine explosion, which killed 12 in January '06, West Virginia's Alma mine fire, which killed 2 in January '06, the Darby Mine number 1 explosion in Kentucky, where 5 miners died in May '06, and the Crandall Canyon Mine collapse in Utah, which killed 6 workers and 3 rescuers in August of '07. Immediately following the Sago mine disaster, Secretary Chao vowed to take the necessary steps to ensure that this never happens again. I remember that. That was some hard times. In 2010, the widows of the 2 men killed in the Alma mine fire sued the federal government for wrongful death, citing lack of inspections, failure to act against violations, and conflicts of interests. The review of the fire acknowledged significant lapses by inspectors, supervisors, and district managers. Man, not in a job like that, you can't be slacking. Holy crap. at the mine, but the agency did not admit liability for the negligent inspections. In 2013, the appeals court ruled that they can be held liable when a negligent inspection results in the wrongful death of a coal miner. The suit was settled in 2014. And they also agreed to develop a training course on preventing fires in underground mines. Let's see. There's a lot more here, but I am fascinated by all this. So this is going to be kind of long if I read all of it. Dang. Yeah, I did not read through all of this before. I thought I had, but this is like the extended version. Let's see. Where was I? I mean, this is really interesting stuff. And I think it all, history all ties in with where we're at now, especially with Mitch McConnell. And, she was recently basically fired when the entire board of directors was fired at the Kennedy Center, or let go or whatever, when dear leader took over. Um, let's see. I think I was right here. Workplace safety. During her tenure, the Department of Labor achieved record low worker injury, illness, and fatality rates, record back wages recovered, and record monetary recoveries for workers' pension plans. That's pretty amazing. In '09 internal audit appraising an occupational safety and health administration initiative focusing on problematic workplaces for the past 6 years stated that employees had failed to gather needed data, conducted uneven inspections and enforcement, and failed to discern repeat fatalities because records misspelled the company's names or failed to notice when two subsidiaries with the same owner were involved. It also noted that after rules changes in January '08, the number of targeted companies declined by almost half. Post-Bush administration from '09 to 2017. In '09, she resumed her previous role at a think tank, and she contributed to Fox News and other media outlets. She also served as a director on a number of corporate and nonprofit boards, including the Institute of Politics at Harvard Kennedy School. She went to school at Harvard. Wells Fargo, New York Presbyterian Hospital, News Corp, Dole Food Company, and Protective Life Corporation. According to financial disclosure forms, Chao was slated to receive $1 to $5 million as compensation for her service on the board of Wells Fargo. In June 2011, she was awarded the Woodrow Wilson Award for Public Service. That's pretty huge. I'm going to guess she was the first Asian to get that award, and maybe even the first woman. In January 2015, she resigned from the board of Bloomberg Philanthropies, which she had joined in 2012, because of its plans to significantly increase support for the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal initiative. In February of 2017, the Associated Press reported that Chao was paid by a speaker's bureau to give a speech regarding women's empowerment to an organization later found to be linked to People's Mujahideen. It's Mujahideen, Mujahideen of Iran, a group exiled from Iran after actions in the 70s against the Shah of Iran and the Ayatollah Khomeini. Similar speeches were delivered by former Joint Chiefs of Staff General Hugh Shelton, Commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps General James Conway, former National Security Advisor General James L. Jones, former CIA Directors Porter Gross and James Woolsey, former FBI Director Louis Freeh, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, my favorite. Man, what a name, too. And former governors Howard Dean of Vermont and Ed Rendell of Pennsylvania. So yeah, Rudy Giuliani is allegedly recovering from the alleged car accident that he got in over the weekend. Like, that whole thing is bizarre. He has like a neck injury, and he's like saying that he just needs physical therapy for a couple of weeks. That doesn't sound, I don't know. I've had physical therapy. I've had neck injuries. That doesn't sound right. It takes a long time to heal from that. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump announced on November 29th, 2016, that he would nominate Chao to be Secretary of Transportation. The U.S. Senate confirmed Chao on January 31st, 2017, by a vote of 93-6, with her husband, then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, abstaining. Well, yeah. As Secretary of Transportation, Chao led the presidential delegation to the enthronement ceremony for Japanese Emperor Naruhito. Am I saying that right? She led the U.S. delegation to the inauguration of Indonesia's President Joko Widodo. I don't know if I said that right either. Widodo. Widodo. Resignation following January 6th. On January 7th, 2021, the day after the January 6th Capitol attack, Chao submitted her resignation effective January 11th, 2021. She was then the highest-ranking member of the administration to resign due to the riots and the first cabinet officer to do so. Her resignation cited the traumatic and entirely avoidable violence and stated that it deeply troubled her. Drone technology. In 2017, Chao announced the establishment of a pilot program to test and evaluate the integration of civil and public drone operations into the airspace system. In 2018, 10 applicants were selected to participate in the project. In 2019, the Federal Aviation Administration issued an air carrier and operator certificate to UPS Flight Forward for drone deliveries to a hospital campus in Raleigh, North Carolina. In December 2019, after multiple reports in Colorado and Nebraska of unidentified objects in formation at night over several remote rural counties, the FAA proposed a new rule that would require drones to be remotely identifiable. Jeffrey A. Rosen chaired Chao's New and Emerging Technologies Council. Chao and Rosen led DOT's efforts to safely enable the use of drones in the airspace, including the FAA's drone pilot program. The DOT under Chao issued updated guidelines on automated or self-driving cars and trucks. He also helped with FAA's successful efforts to reform its regulations and restore the U.S. lead in enabling the largest number of private commercial space launches. Under Chao, Rosen served as chair of DOT's regulatory reform task. He and Chao focused on improving the infrastructure permitting process, and reforming the regulatory systems to reduce costs. COVID-19 responses. In May 2020, following the start of the COVID-19 outbreak and related changes to travel, Chao sternly warned airlines to follow their published ticket refund procedures as well as DOT regulations. Interesting, because Dear Leader currently just undid that. I just heard about that today. I don't know when he did it, but yeah, so now airlines can cancel their flights and not refund your money. That doesn't mean they will, I wouldn't think. I mean, that's bad for business, but they can. So, um, so, refund procedures as well as DOT regulations in light of high demand for travel changes. She demanded airlines provide cash refunds as opposed to vouchers when required by law and urged them to provide cash refunds as broadly as possible. Chao later announced the disbursement of $1.2 billion in grants to airports to maintain readiness for when passenger travel returned. The funds were distributed to 405 airports for infrastructure and safety improvements, such as improved runway lighting. 8 tribal governments were also awarded separate transportation funds to maintain infrastructure during COVID. Chao also worked to permit truckers to deliver essential goods to New York City, which had been attempting to impose a 14-day quarantine on out-of-state truckers bringing goods into the city. Wow. The city dropped the requirement following federal government pressure. Her department also worked with state governments to maintain access to highway rest areas, including permitting food trucks to provide hot food to truckers and travelers. The CARES Act enabled the Department of Transportation to make $114 billion of federal aid available for the transportation sector. The largest allocation was $25 billion to support local public transit systems, of which $22.7 billion was dedicated to large and small urban areas, and the remaining $2.2 billion for rural areas. The act also made available $10 billion for grants to commercial and general aviation airports for capital expenditures, operating expenses such as payroll and utilities and debt payments, and over $1 billion allocated for grants to Amtrak to cover lost revenues, buy fuel and construction materials, and maintain its route network. The CARES Act also enabled the department to provide assistance to the aviation sector through loans and loan guarantees for grants for worker and contractor pay and benefits. Other proposals. In March 2019, Chao announced the formation of the Non-Traditional and Emerging Transportation Technology Council, an internal Department of Transportation group for identifying jurisdictional and regulatory gaps. When considering new transportation technologies, I didn't read that right, Department of Transportation group for identifying jurisdictional and regulatory gaps when considering new transportation technologies. In April 2019, the FAA released proposed new regulations to modernize the rules for commercial spaceflight launches and reentries. At a congressional hearing in July 2019, the president of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation criticized the proposal as not delivering on its stated goals. In October of 19, Chao launched the Rural Opportunities to Use Transportation for Economic Success initiative, intended to improve rural transportation infrastructure. It sought to achieve this goal by developing tools and information aggregating DOT resources and providing technical assistance. The program is intended to consider the unique needs of rural transportation networks to meet national goals of safety, mobility, and economic competitiveness. The U.S. Department of Transportation reportedly sought to cut funding and loan guarantees for domestic American shipping companies, shipyards, and shipbuilders. These proposed budget cuts were rejected by Congress. Chao's department also sought for 3 years to prevent funding for a program that supports the viability of small domestic U.S. shipyards. That's interesting. I'm going to reread that. Chao's department also sought for 3 years to prevent funding for a program that supports the viability of small domestic U.S. shipyards, and a separate program that issues loan guarantees for the construction or reconstruction of ships with American registration. And that's interesting because her family probably still owns one of the biggest Chinese shipping companies in the world, multi-billion-dollar company. That's how they got their monies. Controversies. In 2013, a liberal super PAC, Progressive Kentucky, tweeted about Mitch McConnell's Chinese wife and alleged that she is why your job moved to China. The tweets were removed following an investigation by NPR that noted Chao as a U.S. citizen, born in Taiwan, and that the PAC had failed to file the required disclosures. A similar message by a Kentucky Democrat in 2014 claimed that Chao isn't from Kentucky, she's Asian. An apology was issued by the Kentucky Democratic Party. In 2021, Chao spoke publicly against incidents of anti-Asian harassment. Critics have claimed that her family shipping company, Foremost Group, has ties to China. From January 2018 to April 2019, 72% of the total tonnage of chartered cargo shipped by Foremost was shipped to and from China. During Mitch McConnell's re-election campaign in 2020, his Democratic opponent, Amy McGrath, accused McConnell of making millions from China. The Washington Post called these claims spurious and rated them 3 Pinocchios out of a possible 4. As Secretary of Transportation, Chao appeared in at least a dozen interviews with her 96-year-old father, James, the founder of her family's shipping company. Some media outlets said the appearances raised ethical concerns, as public officials are prohibited from using their office to profit others or themselves. Wait a second. Did anyone let Donnie know about that? The Transportation Department's Inspector General cited numerous instances where Chao's office helped promote her family's shipping business. The Inspector General asked the Trump administration's Justice Department in December 2020 to consider a criminal investigation into Chao, but the DOJ denied the request. Federal disclosures cited by the New York Times revealed a gift to Chao and her husband from Chao's father valued between $5 million and $25 million. Chao pledged in 2017 to divest into cash the deferred stock units she earned while she was on the board of directors of Vulcan Materials by April 2018. After the Wall Street Journal and other major news outlets reported in late May 2019 that she was still holding stock worth $250,000 to $500,000, she sold it on June 3rd, 2019 for a gain of $50,000 since April 2018. A report by the Inspector General did not identify any evidence of a financial conflict of interests. We are getting towards the end. Not to worry. In October 2018, Politico analysis found that Chao had more than 290 hours of appointments which were labeled as private during working hours on working days in the first 14 months of her tenure as Secretary of Transportation, which former Department of Transportation officials described as unusual. DOT officials stated that the private labeling existed to help ensure Chao's security. In June 2019, Politico reported that in 2017, Chao had designated her aide, Todd Inman, as a special liaison to help with grant applications and other priorities for Transportation Department projects in the state of Kentucky, the only state to have such a liaison. Inman was to act as an intermediary, am I saying that word right? I think so. Between the department, local Kentucky officials, and Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell, who is her husband. This resulted in grants of at least $78 million for projects in Mitch McConnell's strongholds, Boone County and Owensboro. Inman had worked on the 2008 and 2014 re-election campaigns of McConnell. McConnell and local officials brought up the grants when he announced in Owensboro in December 2018 that he was running for re-election in 2020. Inman later became Chao's chief of staff. However, the Inspector General did not find any irregularities with respect to grants benefiting Kentucky and saw awards to Kentucky that were consistent with other state results and other states' results, and did not find evidence of steering, and concluded that the investigation did not uncover evidence that Mr. Inman influenced grant awards benefiting Kentucky or gave Kentucky applicants an improper advantage. In May 2020, the Trump administration removed the acting Inspector General of the Transportation Department, Mitch Bem. Bem, who was not a political appointee, was conducting an investigation into whether Secretary Elaine Chao was giving preferential treatment to projects in Kentucky. Her husband, Mitch McConnell, is the Senator of Kentucky and faced a re-election bid at the time. Trump appointed Howard Skip Elliott as interim Inspector General of the Transportation Department to replace Bem. However, at the time, Elliott served in a dual role where Chao was his boss. Thus, Elliott was head of an office that was investigating his own actions and those of Chao. No words. In September of 2019, the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives Committee on Oversight and Reform began an investigation into whether she used political office to benefit her family's business interests. In a September 16th letter from the Oversight Committee to Chao, was documented allegations that the Department of Transportation was forced to cancel a trip to China in 2017 that Chao had planned to take because the State Department's ethics officials challenged her attempts to include her family members in official meetings with the Chinese government. The trip was canceled due to scheduling issues and no ethics charges were sustained. On March 4th, 2021, the Inspector General released their report regarding numerous ethics violations, including using department resources for personal errands and for promoting her father's biography. It also stated that it had referred its investigation to the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. for criminal prosecution in December 2020. Both declined to open criminal investigations into Chao. After her resignation in January 2021 in protest over the January 6th Capitol attacks, President Trump referred to Chao using a racial slur and labeled the Taiwan-born U.S. citizen as a China lover. The slur was immediately condemned by Republican, Democratic, Asian American, and other community leaders, including the CEO of the Anti Defamation League. Trump also referred to Chao as crazy. Yeah, I thought she was like crazy China wife, I thought was what he called her to Mitch McConnell. Let's see what else it says here. We're getting towards the end. In August 2021, Chao was elected to the board of directors of the Kroger supermarket chain. In 2021, Chao also joined the board of trustees of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. She holds 38 honorary doctorates, including an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters from Georgetown McDonnell School of Business in 2015. She was initiated into Omicron Delta Kappa at SUNY Plattsburgh as an honoris causa initiate in 96. In 06, inaugural class winner of the Great Immigrants Award named by Carnegie Corporation of New York. Wow. I wasn't actually expecting to read that whole thing. Like I said, I thought I was looking up one that was a lot shorter. So on that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. It's getting kind of late. It's almost 1 o'clock. And I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Drink your water, eat your protein and your veggies. Take care.